This is Joe Pistone, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
We were just talking off mic, and I decided, hey man, let's just get going. This is too good. One of the things that guys like us, right? A counterintelligence agent. Were you counterintelligence in FBI, or what was your?
Well, all my work was criminal. I did some counterintelligence when I was with Naval Intelligence, but in the FBI, it was all criminal.
We were talking about the different kind of people that do these jobs, right? You and I are guys that need to be out on the street to go get things done. How would you categorize the guys that can safely and repeatedly go out and develop trust with someone that we're targeting?
Well, I think it's the individual. Number one, you have to have confidence in yourself, and I always found that the good the good undercover agents are twofold. They're first of all, they were good investigators. They were good investigators, straight up investigations. They could carry it out from A to Z.
Mm.
Okay, they're the ones that transformed into good undercovers. So you got to have confidence in your abilities to do the job. You got to have the mental capacity to stay focused on your job and know what the purpose of the undercover or the intelligence operation is. Uh, and I also think that you have to have faith in your organization that you're working with or for, and commitment to that organization. Uh, but basically, it's mental toughness. I mean, if you come down to it, it's the mental toughness to keep all these things in order, to be able to stay focused on the operation at hand, to know why you're there and what your purpose is and what the end purpose is.
Mm.
And I think a lot of undercovers. Uh, I mean, I do a lot of schools and I do a lot of work with undercovers. Is they lose sight of the fact what the end result of this case is going to be, and
Mm.
that's to go to court. So, and that's where your focus and mental toughness comes in during the course of this operation to maintain that.
One of the things that we have to struggle with when we do this kind of work is what the FBI wants, and then your approach to get it. Like you and I both know the organizational chart has a bunch of shadowy figures with no picture, no real data. We think this guy exists, right? But we can't prove him, right? And so
Right.
the person who's doing the analysis is like, get me a picture of Joe, and you're like, yeah, okay. And the thing I've learned is that whatever you want desperately, I can never ask for directly. It has to come to me through other things. Because if you come in, you're like, hey, I'd like to meet the boss, like that.
Yeah.
You don't have that next meeting. So how do you get to the things? And then I want to add this element in. It seemed to me that the things that I found had nothing to do with what the Army or the State Department wanted to know, right? It was the things that I found by looking not at what they wanted. And I gave them a better understanding of the battlefield because I didn't focus on what they craved. I focused on what was obvious and out there and that they had no idea about.
Right. Well, the two things I focused on was what intelligence am I gathering that I know we don't have?
Right.
Okay. And also, what am I involved in here that's going to be of evidentiary value? If it's not of evidentiary value, what good is it?
Right.
Because you need that evidence to get to the courtroom, or you need the intelligence information. So, like you say, a lot of times you get the administrators giving you A, B, C, D, E, and F, when the only things you need is D and E. So that's all I concentrated on, uh, is evidentiary information or intelligence information,
Mm.
and that's how I kept it going.
In this line of work, there might even be other things that are presented to you. And instead of being A or E, it might be rutabaga. And you're like, damn, I really need to look into this, but I'm too goddamn busy. Can you? I had Jack Barsky on the show. He was a deep cover agent for the KGB, right? And he came here. And I was like, hey, man, I know, like, I'm looking for you as a counterintelligence agent. That means you got to constantly be covering your tracks. He's like, it was exhausting. All the things I had to do, because anytime you communicate, you're exposed, right? And so you have to go through all of these protocols. Oh my God, and surveillance detection routes. Jesus,
Right.
you can spend more of your time. And look, you're a dude that's going to have to go to a bar for 15 hours and drink and manage that and get rest. How was that workload?
It's tremendous. But another thing, I think why I was always successful, especially in this 6-year one and all my other ones, is I never changed my personality, and I never changed who I was in real life. In other words, I'm not a drinker. All right. The extent of my drinking is maybe a half a bottle of beer or a glass of wine, and I maintained that through all my undercover operations. Uh, I even went to church during the operations. I mean, because what and you need to notice you have to maintain being a real person.
Yeah.
You know, so I never changed my personality. I mean, I was the same guy undercover as I was if I'm sitting here talking to you.
Yeah, no, I get that 100%. The Taliban called a sit down for me and my partner Rich because we were part of the battlefield, right? We mattered. And we were showing up on their radar, and because we were just the dudes that we were, not that we were cool, but we were never like trying to influence anybody. We were there. How do we contribute? How do we stay out of your way? And the Taliban recognized that, and they signed off on us being there. But and the other thing, like you said, this is so important. I would say in my position, I could say, my name is Pete. I'm from California. And I could be as honest as I would normally would be with these guys. Right. And I would tell them, like, I would, like, I'm here to ask questions. Yes. You want to call me a spy? Yes, that's what I am. And if I ask a question you don't want to answer, don't answer it. The last thing I want to do is cause anybody any trouble. Right. And that blended into the Taliban thing. And I'm like, you let me know the minute you see me doing something that you don't like, I won't come back.
Right, because you've had the mindset the same as I did. You're in their world now.
Yeah.
You're not in the U.S. Army's world or the FBI world or the law enforcement world. You're in their world, and that's. I mean, I walked away from many a conversation. Could I have gained great information from it? Yeah, but in reality, I wasn't supposed to be in on this conference, so I would just get up and walk away. And what does that do? That's a mark for me, a plus, because it's, hey, Donnie, Donnie knows enough. We don't have to ask him, Donnie, you can't be in on this conversation. That's in the beginning.
Yeah.
So, that builds up the trust that they have in you, and show that you're not, trying to get everything that you're supposed to be getting. But and administrators don't realize that. They don't realize that.
There's a lot. So I want to go back to the other side. One of the things I always talk about is my managing the other side of the equation, the Army side, the State Department side, took a lot of effort as well. We talk about like T.E. Lawrence and all the incredible things he did, but when he shows up from being deep undercover and operating out in the desert, the military doesn't know who he is. They're like, who is this guy, right? And so he had no influence. He had limited influence when he got back. Same thing applies for me. Is if I'm in the field all the time and I never tend to the chickens in the roost, I don't have trust with them. And so it's like you have to balance the amount of trust. Like you have to be present in cases. I don't know if that works for you, but the FBI is going to wonder, where's Joe? And you're like, God damn, I can't be here all the time, fellas. I got stuff to do,
Yeah. I mean, I'd go, another thing too, I was lucky in that, I had a good handler. We knew each other. He knew the type of guy I was. And if I didn't contact him for 3, 4, 5 days, it wasn't any big deal because he knew that the only reason I'm contacting you is to regurgitate information that I know is valuable. If I don't have information that's valuable, what am I going to talk to you about? I mean, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so
How much writing did you have to do when you were undercover? You know, like justifying expenses, writing any kind of intel reports. How much of that administrative work did you have to do?
well, as far as the administrative work, my handler put everything to paper. I just regurgitated basically over the telephone.
Yeah.
And then he reduced it to paper. And then when I would hook up with him wherever, I would review the paperwork and sign off on it.
Mhm.
And if he left something out, we'd add it, or if something wasn't exactly what I said, we'd fix it. So basically, and he did all the expenses and everything, because I couldn't have stuff laying around my apartment, or as far as to identify me uh, as law enforcement with vouchers and stuff. And I mean, you're in the Army, you know the voucher system. I mean, you gotta account for everything.
Yeah.
So I just regurgitated everything to him, and he reduced it to paper.
That's such a big thing, though, a load off your back, because you're not like, I would have to write my own report, do my patrol, plan my next patrol, integrate with the unit that I'm with. I mean, by the time you finish your day, you're like, it was tomorrow, 30
Exactly.
hours of work, right?
And the administrative stuff look, most people get in trouble for what? The administrative stuff, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
not not for the job they're doing.
Yeah.
They're off $3 on their expense.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's why I left everything to him.
Yeah.
No.
When you talk about this, tracking expenses, one of the things, at least in the military, right? There's always these people that don't understand our job, and they're always looking to see if you're stealing money, right? And they're like, you can't use this money because you're going to steal it. And the regulation for us to hand money to sources, it's maybe 12 pages long. It's the thinnest little pamphlet ever, right? Like, you want to talk about harassment? It's like a tome. It's like 500 pages on sexual harassment. But to manage source funds, nothing. But people who don't know that, like, look, if I don't steal it, I'm not breaking the law, and I don't have to track all of it, because some of it's incidental. Oh, and by the way, I work in a war zone. So, I'm not getting rich, $5 here and $10.
But the people back in Washington, they don't take it that you're working in a war zone. It's just that you're out there working,
Right.
I mean, so many times, I mean, I used to, when I called home, I used to reverse the charges, right? I mean, that's, I'd go find a payphone somewhere, and my phone bill was astronomical, and that was money that I could never recover from the bureau, which people don't understand. When I say people, I'm talking about administrators that are the bean counters. Well, how did you want me to call? How did you want me to stay in touch with my family?
Yeah.
So you want me to go, get $10 worth of coins and just sit there at a phone booth and just, popping them in? But that's, to me, that was the biggest obstacle to working undercover was the administration. I mean, dealing with vouchers and all the paperwork you had to go through. I mean, it's crazy.
You have to have a good source handler. You have to have someone who's a giant ass that can take a big chew, and he doesn't care, she doesn't care. They're like, yeah, they can yell at me all you want. I'm fighting for Joe no matter what. And you have to believe that that's actually happening.
Yeah. I mean, I was lucky. One of my handlers was an MIT graduate, so he knew what was going on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When you talk about like the expenses and all of these things, I'm definitely curious about this because you're a federal employee, and as far as I know in federal law, and I'm no cop or nothing, but you can't give your work for free to the government. And so if you're working 24 hours, at some point you max out on compensation and have to go into comp time. Because I mean that's what happened to me. Like the bean counters hated it. They're like, "What do you mean you're working 110 hours a week?" And I'm like, "Well, I work for the 82nd Airborne. They don't take days off, and if you leave at like 12 hours, they call you half day." Right? Like you're not doing your job. And so we work hard around here. And it's not hard to get to 100 hours for a team that works 12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Of course
So
not.
how does that work?
And when you're working undercover, you know, you don't say, "Oh, it's 5 o'clock," you know, or 7 o'clock. I got to leave, you know.
Yeah.
In the beginning of our undercover days, that's the way. That's the way it was. Not that you had to leave, not that you left, the undercover left,
Right.
but there was no like in the beginning. When you're in a deep cover situation, you're working 7 days a week. So in the beginning, there was you weren't getting paid for working Saturdays and Sundays.
Right.
Because according to some regulation, it had to be scheduled ahead of time. I mean,
Yeah.
But eventually in the undercover field, we finally, you know, after a few years of wrangling and arguing, we got around that where, you know, you just can't not show up Saturday and Sunday.
Right.
You know, why you around Monday to Friday? Where the hell do you go Saturday and Sunday?
Yeah.
So the guys and the gals, you know, that was just freebie days that you're working. And holidays. You worked holidays. You never got paid for it.
Right.
But then, like I say, eventually we got that change within the bureau that if you worked holidays, you got paid for a holiday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then again, you had to prove you worked a holiday. You know, I mean,
yeah. So they were trying to tell us, so like, hey, you know, these are the things that don't count. They're not billable, right? Like if you have to run to a bunker and you're sitting there for 2 hours until they call the all clear, that's not billable. And I'm like, that's bullshit because I'm doing something for you. I'm not be doing this.
Or you're not in that bunker because you want to be.
Yeah. Or like if you're on the flight line, because you have to be on the flight line, you cannot leave. Because that helicopter comes and you don't show, that is really bad, right? That goes up high because they don't want people missing flights.
Right.
So you sit out there, might be 5 hours. It might not show. It might get canceled 3 days in a row where you just constantly spend 3 days waiting 20 hours out of the day for that flight that never comes. Every single bit of that in my world, that's got to be billable. The bean counters, they hate that. They're like, you're not doing anything. Like, motherfucker, it's 115 degrees outside. I've got nothing to do except for sit there and wait on that stupid corporate ride.
Well, it was the same. And, you know, a lot of this was in the beginning is that, look, you're with these guys. You're in a deep cover situation. You're in Miami. I'm in Miami. I'm wherever. And, well, you know, you're sleeping, you know, from 12 to 8 in the morning. Yeah, but I'm in the same room, the same suite as these guys.
Right.
You know, as the bad guys. So, you know, you're sitting around BSing. You might not, you know, it might be 2:30 before you hit the sack. Yeah, but that's you're sleeping. Yeah, but I'm sleeping in a room that's next. I mean, so you know, it's.
And if I leave, it's you know, like I'm not allowed to leave.
Yeah.
I'm sleeping on Sonny Black's couch or whoever, right?
Yeah, you know, I'm on his couch. You know how many nights I slept on his couch.
Right.
But you know, a lot of that got changed. But in the beginning, it's, you know, they want you to do the job, but they can't bend on the regulations that have been in place, you know, from 50 years ago when nobody was doing this work, right?
That's right. That's right. If you guys haven't figured out, we're talking to Joe Pistone. You guys definitely got to check out his podcast. It's called Deep Cover Podcast. It's on all of the platforms. You can go to the website or just go to Apple or wherever you listen. That's going to be there. Definitely got to check out Joe's stuff. He's got some other stuff he's working on as a season 3 coming up for something else, but we're not talking about that today. We're talking about Deep Cover Podcast. Definitely give that a spin. My buddy Sebastian puts up the words, "I'm working here." You know, it's so true. You know. I wanted to, so again, like on the internal stuff, so you work all this time, there's all this free time that you didn't get initially later on. Does that accelerate your retirement timetable because of this high risk, long hour work? Or do you still have to do a 20 or 25-year stint?
No, you still, it doesn't, undercover doesn't do anything for you, to be honest with you. I mean, it doesn't accelerate your retirement. It doesn't add to your retirement benefits. It doesn't check a mark if you want advancement in the organization. It's on the low end of the totem pole.
Yeah. Yeah. How unlikely was your success, to be able to be as good as you were, aligned with the right case handlers and all that stuff? How likely is it that you could repeat that process if you were to go back in time and do it again?
I think we could. The only hindrance now in undercover work is the internet,
Mm.
as far as building a legend, and you know what that is.
Yeah.
That's the biggest hindrance in undercover work now is building a legend that'll be solid 100% because of the internet. I mean, you you put in any name that you take, and something's got to pop up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's really, really hard to build that legend. I do wonder, like back in the old times when you were operating, how were the comms plans with you and your handler? I mean, this is for the audience. This stuff won't be classified now because they're not doing this operation anymore. And most of these techniques are commonly known. So,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Well, it was strictly telephone.
Okay.
We had hello numbers uh, in the in his office. A hello phone. You just call and whoever answers it says hello, but it's not for everybody to answer. Just somebody that knows about the operation.
Yeah.
And if I needed when I needed to sign off on the reports, or I needed cash, we'd meet. Normally, I'd meet at the Museum of Natural History or the Public Library up in New York, up in the city. Not too many chances of running into gangsters in those places.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's hilarious. It's these little things though, right? That do it. So did you have any kind of non-telephonic signal, like the stripe on the telephone pole, the sun visor drop down on the car?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's more technical for the spy people,
Yeah.
The criminal undercovers, they just go at it.
Yeah. Well, we have to have these all safe signals and all these other things, and all that kind of thing.
I mean, you have words. If you're if you're wired and you're in a situation that a surveillance team is listening, you have a code word that if you say that, they know that, hey, it's time to come in and make the charge.
Yeah.
Normally that's the only situation.
How far from you are you from help at any given point in time during an undercover?
Well, most of my work was not surveilled. I mean, I'd say 90, 98, 97% of the time I was on my own.
Mm-hmm.
I would have a surveillance team when I knew I was going to go into a situation where the conversation was going to be like, about murders. So we wanted to get those on tape,
Yeah.
But other than that, I basically was on my own.
One of the things that I get asked a lot is, how do you deal with the fear, right? Like I've had to go into the bar full of ne'er-do-wells, and no one knows, and until you're there and you're like, oh, these guys are just dudes, right? And that's one of the young guy lessons I hadn't learned yet. But how do you deal with that? The fact that you're going to go in and listen, you're always in threat of being discovered, right?
Yeah.
And so you always have that eating at you. How do you manage that?
Well, you know it from your situations. You can't go in with fear. You
Right.
go in, you know, a situation that they know that, hey, it's time to come in and, make the charge. Now, normally that's the only situation. You can't go in with fear. You go in, you know, a situation that they know that, hey, it's time to come in and, make the charge. Now, normally that's the only situation. You can't go in with fear. You go in being very careful and knowing your surroundings, always knowing your surroundings, who's there. Because these guys got good BS detectors, showing fear, it'll come out in your conversations, it'll come out in your voice. And you got to just go in and, it's just that other sense that you have. And, look, doing what you did, you have it.
Yeah.
That, there's danger, but, you know how to get out of it. Or
yeah. You certainly can't lean on a fence either. You can't start taking offense to everything. I mean, I've talked to a guy who literally laughed about how he killed women and children and how they would fall funny when he shot them, right? And so you meet that guy and you can't be like, oh, like be offended.
Yeah. I mean, look,
shocked,
the guys, all the guys I hang around with, they all had hits under their belts,
right?
And more than one, because that's what it is when you're when you're in the mafia. You all got hits under your belt, but you gotta, and that's where I said that mental toughness comes in.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta just say, hey, he's just a person, but all right, he's killed people, but he's no different than anybody else as far as me sitting down here and talking to him.
Yeah.
But in this business, if they think you're wrong, they're not going to think you're an undercover. They're going to think you're a snitch, you're an informant,
right?
And they'll have no problem hitting you right there. If they think you're an undercover, they might, if they think you're a cop, they might think about it twice. But if they think you're a snitch, they're not thinking about it. So there's no second takes. So that's why I tell everybody, just be yourself. And if you're an excitable person, then this isn't the business for you. This isn't the business for you. You can't let stuff bother you.
Yeah. In your line of work, you also have to be willing to stand up and throw some blows and be willing to lose a fight, right? Because you can't just win every single fight all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, because that's not an easy thing to pull off. Look, most people haven't been in a fight in their life. You're getting in fist fights with murderers,
Yeah. And the thing is, what you have to do is, on the street, you got two things that keeps you alive: respect and your credibility. And you can't lose either one of them. You can't lose your respect, or you can't lose your credibility on the street. Otherwise, they're going to walk all over you. And you're going to get into you're going to get into verbal confrontations with bad guys, because everybody doesn't like everybody.
Right.
And not because they think you're a cop or anything. It's, you just don't click. Your personalities just don't click. So you're going to get into verbal confrontations, and you got to stand up to those. You're going to get into physical confrontations. You're not supposed to, but you can't stand there and let somebody walk all over you and maybe give you a smack and not retaliate. So yeah, you have to defend yourself. So even if you come out at the short end of it, at least they know that you're not going to back down from anybody. Lucky, if you're lucky enough, you always come out on the top end of it. And that's another thing that they got these rules about undercover. You can't get into physical confrontations. Well, what are you going to do if somebody gives you a smack in the face, and you get into an argument, a verbal argument? Most times that they're going to lead to a physical confrontation. And if it does, you got to stand there and defend it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've been in several verbal confrontations, and I've been in a couple that led to physical confrontations. And You just, you just do what you would do. I mean, in real life, would you let anybody slap you?
Yeah. No. You do have to think some of this stuff through, though, right? Like your covers and your reactions. For me, it was, I'm in an area where I accept that I could be killed. And then I had like these lines, like if you're within 3 feet of me and I think you intend me harm, I'm going to let go with lethal force if I have to, right? Like you have these boundaries and these barriers. So like if a made guy is giving you the business or whatever, talking to you, you can't embarrass that person, but you also have to stand up to him. I would
Exactly.
imagine you'd pre-think that out. Like what kind of response would I have?
Oh yeah. I mean, with the made guys, you can't touch a made guy, otherwise that'll get you killed. And made guy is a guy that's been officially inducted into a family, that'll get you killed. So if he's arguing with you, and he gives you a slap, you can't hit him back, because you get killed. But you can't back down.
Right.
But you can't back down. Uh, so my thing was, I'm going to stand here and go toe to toe with you. Now, another thing too is, like you said, with that is that I'm not getting up close.
Mm,
And if I got into an argument with some, with a non-made guy, and I knew this was going to escalate, I threw the first blow. You know,
yeah.
uh, and if it was a made guy, I made sure that I was arm's length.
Yes. Yes.
So just like you said, you got to know who you're dealing with,
Uh-huh.
and you got to pre-think it. Look, this guy I could hit, and what's the sense of standing here and arguing for
Right.
10 minutes, back and forth? Let's get it over with.
Not everybody thinks that way, Joe. Not everybody can just let that fist go and think like, not only am I going to fight, I'm going to fight first. Like that's
Yeah,
not
I
the
mean
norm.
that's, but that comes too from being a street guy. I mean, you learn that, from being a street guy. What's the sense of arguing this thing over? Let's either walk away or get it over with. So
One of the things that I realized, and I want to get into like how you progressed because you get better at this as you do it, right? So I've got 70 months in combat zones and over 1,000 patrols, and you have thousands of meetings. You get better at it, right? But one of the when you talk about that aspect of like who to hit, who to not hit, all those kind of things, they also talk about you behind your back, good and bad. There's people communicating like, oh, have you heard about Donnie Brasco? He just punched Bob in the face at the liquor store or whatever it is, right? And these things have a life outside of your control. It never occurred to me until one day, I don't sit down on the ground very well. My body's just kind of broken and everything. And one day a sheikh has a chair waiting for me. And he's like, I knew you guys were coming by. So I brought Pete this chair. Says my name, has a chair. And I'm like, holy shit. These guys talk about us as much as we talk about them.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, like I would meet different guys from different crews, and they already knew who I was, because I was with top guys in the Bananos, and they knew, that I was. We went to Florida, had a nightclub down there. We went to wherever we went. What they do, they talk about the guys who's making money. That they had me tagged as a moneymaker. I mean, I was on the Organized Crime Bureau's list as a member of of the Bananos. I mean, that comes from informants. I mean, so
yeah, that's
I had an informant telling his FBI handler about Donnie Brasco, this new guy around, and man, this guy's like, he's got eyes of a stone cold killer. It's like.
So, we get that. That means you're playing the game, right? Like I would tell my friends, like, I want Pete to come out in the intel reports. I mean, otherwise, I'm out on the field. I don't have a number.
Yeah, exactly.
I want you guys to know who I am. Yeah, I want you to target me because that means I'm doing my damn job.
Doing your job. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's not supposed to be comfortable and easy to do what we do. It's supposed to be dangerous as fuck.
That right.
and you do need a reputation. And if it's fist first, that gets around. It's like, hey, watch out. Donnie Brasco, he'll pop you in the mouth before he says anything else. You
And
gotta
what it
watch.
does is, like you said, and then, if it's a non-made guy, he's going to think about twice about getting into a verbal confrontation with you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. When you look at the process of getting made and everything else, you're watching these guys do it. How heavy does it weigh in your conscience knowing that a lot of these guys that you're going to work with, look, you're going to put a lot of them behind bars. That's your job. But I know you've talked about it in other videos. You don't want to get guys killed, but it's also a byproduct of your job. I for sure have gotten people killed in Iraq, right? Because we've made mistakes,
Yeah.
killed the wrong guy for somebody else. There's all kinds of things like that happen.
Well, like I say, your job or our job is to put him in jail, not to get him killed. However, you got to take the outlook that, look, everybody has a choice in life.
Yeah.
They chose to be gangsters. They were gangsters before they met me, gangsters when I was dealing with them, and they're going to be gangsters after I leave here.
Yeah.
And they know in their life what the consequences are. They expect that maybe at some point in time in the life in the mob, they're going to get whacked.
Yeah.
So it might be callous, but I really, like I said, I didn't want to see anybody get killed, but I didn't take it that it was my fault because I was just doing a job.
One of the things I realized was that, especially in Iraq during this one certain time, it was lethal to be on the streets. And if I was getting a guy killed a month, and I don't know what the pace is, we'll never know, and I don't think it was that high, man, that's nothing compared to people getting their necks cut. People were getting their necks cut, Joe, and like in front of the 7-Eleven, and they would just leave the body there because that was a message. People get their necks cut around here who don't behave, right? We weren't doing that. Like, we might kill the wrong guy because someone said a guy with the mustache was a bad guy, and we killed the wrong guy with the mustache. But there's a lot of violence going on around me, and I'm just playing in that game.
Yeah, and then you take the mob. I mean, the mob the people that the American mob kills are people that are dealing with them. They kill their own. They don't kill citizens. You don't see mob guys running around the street shooting people or slicing their throats. If you read the paper, it's a mob hit. That means that individual that got hit was either a member of a family. He broke one of the rules, or he was a person that was doing illegal business with the family and broke one of the rules. So as long as you keep that in mind, you just do what you have to do. Because look, they're not like you see in the movies, where they sit around and talk like Shakespeare, but
that's so true. These are just real people who have real love for their family and everything else on top of the fact of their business, right?
And they've been gangsters forever. I mean, they didn't wake up one day and said, "Oh, geez, I think I'm going to be a gangster today." They were gangsters growing up on the streets, Right.
Yeah. One of the things, and I want to take a second here to talk to the audience. So one of the things I want to promote is obviously Joe's podcast, which you can see right here. You can go just to deepcoverpodcast.com or just type in Deep Cover on your normal podcast search platform that you guys use and listen to that there. I'm going to tell you now about Save the Brave, my charity that I work with. We work on veteran suicide and try to prevent it, and also trying to help the families deal with the inevitable when it happens. It's a tough challenge, and we're about to do our summer ride across the nation. We're going to go from Temecula, Tucson, El Paso, Odessa, Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, Birmingham, Atlanta, and then finally to Charleston. If you want to participate in some way, I'm trying to get gas raised for the entire trip. There's a motorcycle and a truck. We got to get across the nation and back. So I'm trying to raise the money back myself so that everything else we raise along the way goes straight into the pot and helping out families. A lot of you guys know, my brother passed away from a suicide in October last year. And so this really hit home for me. I was already working with the charity before this happens, right? And so it hits home. So if you want to help, if you want to ride along, if you want to do something, hit me at peterbreakitdownshow.com. That'd be the thing I'd love for you guys to do. And if it's not your thing, cool. What I ask you to do is do whatever your thing is, just a little bit more this month in honor of my brother. And so, because you don't have to deal with veterans. Maybe you're into animals, maybe you're into urban problem, whatever it is. Go do that thing. That's a little bit harder for me in honor of my brother next month. All right, let me get back into what we're talking about. The drug thing. It was really interesting. You and Michael Franzese talking about how the perception of drugs and the mob, at least during a certain era, is out of whack with what we probably think we know about.
Yeah, the individuals I was involved with, any of the, it was mostly like the Bonanos. They were importers. I mean, these guys weren't out on the street selling drugs. They imported it, and then they sold it in keys to people. They weren't out on a street corner. They were selling to other organizations, and I didn't know any of the guys I ever hung around. I didn't know anybody that used drugs. It was a money-making proposition for them. Now, today, who knows? Because you got a different generation out there. But none of the people that I dealt with ever used drugs, and most of the drugs was most of the people involved. It was just a handful. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, say, you take a family. It wasn't everybody in that family. It might have been, one or two people in that family. But the other guys were just out hustling with bookmaking and other scams and schemes. Today, there's just so much money in it that I'm sure that 75-80% of them are involved some way, one way or another.
I talked to a drug trafficker. He does the southern border, and he just talks about it doesn't matter what administration's in place, doesn't matter what policy's in place. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, and they just adapt to the environment better than us. And they know that some guys are going to go to jail. They know what to say. They have the lawyers. They're going to do a certain amount of time. They're going to get out.
They know they're going to lose. They're going to lose X amount of loads.
Yep. Yeah. It's all calculated. It's
all business. And look at the border today.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like nobody's doing anything about all this fentanyl coming through. What the hell's going on there?
Yeah. Yeah. And he said that, China brings the fentanyl in to help destabilize the U.S. And these are his words. And then he said also the Mexicans society down there is like, hey, screw the Americans. They're a godless people. Let it come on through. We'll make some money and have a little more, so what? Right. And so they've justified it through religion, to allow this to happen.
I mean, it comes in there, but we probably got more drug addicts in the U.S. than they got in Mexico, right?
Oh, for sure. Right. I wanted to go back, and you were talking about like the industry of being in the mob, and what are the things that you and I have to deal with? Again, we can't take offense to everything we see. It's a legitimate upbringing. If your father was in the mafia in some way, that is part of the family business. Maybe your dad pushes you away and you don't do it, but like, a boxer raises a boxer's son, right? A cop raises a cop's son. You have multi-generations of, it's the same thing. These folks do what they do because this is what their family and community does. How do you reconcile with that? I mean, you don't want to forgive bad behavior, but some of this bad behavior is the culture that they're from.
Yeah. And you have to remember the neighborhoods that they come from, close-knit Italian neighborhoods, whatever borough it's in New York or whatever area it is in different parts of the country. So it's not like growing up, you don't know who the gangsters are in the neighborhood, because it might be your father, it's probably your uncle, your cousin, and what do they see?
Yep.
They see guys hanging out with a lot of money, not going 8 to 5 jobs every day. And so and they start out as maybe being runners, for the uncle or the father or the cousin's bookmaking operation.
Yeah.
And it's a normal transition right into the becoming a full-fledged gangster. uh, you can go back in the day, and I'm sure even today you can go in any of the neighborhoods, and a 10-year-old kid will tell you who the main guys are. It's no big secret.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're a young agent and they're like, yeah, we're going to improve this operation. And you're also on the cutting edge of doing this because the FBI didn't want, deep cover operations. So you walk out there, you got your fancy leather jacket, you're going into Little Syracuse or whatever neighborhood you're going to go into to find trouble, but you're not the agent that you become later on. So when you look back at that guy who's going to go be a drug or a diamond thief or that kind of thing, what would you have done differently? How would you have approached that introduction into that community differently? Because everybody thinks it's easy, but I think you will agree to this. Maybe not for what you guys do, but most of the operations I started went nowhere because I wasn't able to I was, we could throw a spark out there, I could put some tinder out there, but if it doesn't work, you have to repeat and go somewhere else and figure out where you can get it. You can't just keep trying in a spot where it's not going to happen.
Well, the easiest way is to have an informant bring you in, which I did not have, only because it was such a close-knit, tight-lipped operation.
Right.
And I didn't want any informant because you can't really trust an informant. You don't know where the hell they're going to go to. So unfortunately, fortunately, I was lucky to have good supervisors where he understood that you don't just walk in, and say, I'm Donnie Brasco, jewel thief. It takes time. And I mean, I didn't have any worthwhile conversations probably till almost 7 months into the operation.
This is
And just by hanging out and talking to people, and also what they lose sight of the fact of, you got to know your enemy.
Yeah.
Just like in your business, you have to know your enemy. Who am I fighting? Who am I trying to infiltrate? What rules and regulations do they abide by? And every organization has them. What will help me advance by knowing a rule or a regulation that they live by, and that's how I did it. Just by knowing these rules and regulations, what'll get you killed, what won't get you killed, and eventually it worked.
Eventually, right? Yeah, there is an elegance still though to what we do, so you get better at doing it. One of the funny things is always once you're good at doing it, and I would say I had to found everything on trust, both directions, with the enemy and the community, and then also with the people that I'm working with. If I didn't focus on that, there'd be a problem. But it's the little things, those rules. Like in Afghanistan, you don't use someone's first name. They don't do it, so I don't do it, right? And it's just, and they don't do it because it's dangerous, and they don't want danger. They don't want to do things that look like they're working with the Americans because it's dangerous. So you just let that be and you build trust. When you said 7 months, that makes total sense to me. And then also, like when I'm looking to build trust, when I kind of finally figured out the system, I realized that I had to listen for things from the person I was talking to. Not I'm hearing what they're saying, but I'm listening for triggers. I'm listening for elements of trust. And when they start to repeat what I said to the people that they're working with in Afghanistan or in Iraq, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got influence now with this guy. I've got a measure of trust. It's probably low risk trust, but when they offer me high risk trust, I've got to be ready to accept that, even if it means, hey, Pete, come to my house. I want you to meet my family, and we want to cook for you specifically. That could be a meat that you don't come back from, but it also might be the meat that establishes that high risk trust that we're like, hey, we've advanced this relationship.
Yeah, I mean, look, you like you said, you know your target group. You know certain trigger words that that lets them know that, in my case, you're a street guy. Uh, and in that world, like you said, in your world, you don't call anybody by their first name.
Right.
In my world here, even though these bars, and restaurants I had gone into with 7 months, I knew the bartender's name, but I never called him by that because I was never introduced to him. How did I? I knew his name from other people in there talking to him.
Right.
And when I finally did crack the ice with this one guy, uh, we got introduced. You don't introduce yourself with your last name.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, he said he's Tommy. I'm Don. I don't ask him what his last name. We're normal people. That's what they do. I don't say, hey, I'm Donnie Brasco. Uh, I'm Donnie. So just knowing those little things, which is another plus on the side.
Yeah, and having someone like Lefty to teach you a lot of those laws and rules and how to behave within that, and then finding your own
Exactly.
way to do it. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Man, this is awesome. I don't want to take all the time just asking you questions. I know we have so many overlapping things. Do you want to ask me anything?
No, I don't want to give anything away for you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. And I could do this with you all day because there's just so many parallels and intricacies that we've experienced, even though we had, somewhat different jobs, but
You
you just
still have
don't.
to have the same mindset.
Yeah.
You have, and like I say, you have to have that mental toughness to be able to categorize, to stay focused, to remember who you are, remember why you're there, what your purpose is.
Yeah.
So and I think it's more of a shot, and maybe lack of a better word, in your profession of you getting whacked than I was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because the gods of war are a lot less
Yeah,
indiscriminate.
exactly, and everybody you're dealing with packing a pistola,
Oh,
or
yeah. Yeah.
or
Or an RPG.
yeah, uh, where every day guys aren't packing,
Yeah.
and they're not they're not walking around with rocket launchers.
Yeah. Here's my final thing for you, man. I don't know if this will resonate, so it's a bit of a jump, but I think it will. So when you get good at what I'm doing and you get multiple degrees of black belt, because I've just done it more than everybody else, and the commander stands you up in the staff room and says, I want you to listen to this guy right here. He's going to tell us some important things today, right? That's a recognition from the Army. This is a brigade commander. He's in charge of 5,000 people and hundreds of miles of space, in a combat zone. And they're like, listen to Pete, right? That turns into this. Hey, Pete, can you come to our district and solve our problem in 2 weeks? And I'm like, whoa, why not?
Well, yeah, I mean, I had that happen to me. I successfully infiltrated the Colombos and then the Bananos,
Yeah.
and then I get a call. Hey, we're trying to get into the Florida mob. Can you help us? And everything is, well, yeah, I can help you, but it's got to be on my timetable.
Right. Right.
Because I'm vouching for that undercover operation, and the first person they're going to come after is me. And then the same thing out in Milwaukee. Hey, we got an operation out here, but we're not going anywhere. So yeah, but again, it's got to be on my timetable. And I always said, first of all, I want to know who the undercover is.
Yeah.
I mean, just because he's FBI or just because he's military,
Yeah.
doesn't mean he's that good.
And they may be stuck for a reason. That reason might be them.
Exactly. And once I knew who they were, and I knew them, then I said, okay, but it's got to be on my timetable, because you can't just go in and say, hey, I know there's a place down in Florida that we could take over. Well, again, you got to know the rules of the mafia. the country is divided for the mafia.
Yeah.
And you know, and whatever city you're in, only certain, you know, only that family can operate illegal activities there. So another family can't just walk in and
Right.
and start conducting illegal activities. It's got to go through a whole, what they call a sit down, you know, mediation. I mean, you know, it's like board meetings with these guys.
Business. Yeah.
Business, you know, going into another family's territory.
Yeah.
So,
well, listen, I know this has been a great time for us on this end, and just a great conversation. I was glad to be able to get to know you and swap notes, because it's always great whenever I find people that have done our kind of work and being able to share. I don't think we can ever get enough of it. So thanks for doing that, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I appreciate
Anything in closing?
Well, just thank you for having me on, and stay safe, brother. Stay safe.
I will. You too. Everybody go check out Deep Cover Podcast. All right, stand by for 1 sec, Joe.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.